Hi, am I visible and audible?
Yes to both.
All right. For moral activists, this means that losing any case is a damnation of your soul. You have committed a sin. You have let down your community. This is a burden you carry every day and you will carry for the rest of your life. This is something we will not damn an up and coming lawyer to, not only just because it's not within their interests, but also that this will be a miserable life for them. What does the setup look like? This is an up and coming lawyer, which can mean a few things, that they likely just graduated or are taking their first steps of being able to gain influence in the field of law, which means that there's a very high likelihood that they are in very competitive spaces. There are a lot of up and coming lawyers in the US, and that means you have to be competitive. You have to be the top dog in that arena where you can be flexible, where other firms will want to take you because you don't have political stances. You're willing to be that person who has the killer instinct out there on the court. The most important thing to note as well is that even if you're from a minority community, that doesn't automatically mean that you will always want to pursue its interests. This is still a human being, which likely means that they have to care about the people who are most proximate to them and the people that they have grown up with. It is their family that they feel a closer obligation to, because it's quite literally your parents that you sent you into law school in the first place, which means that you likely have a greater affinity for them versus other people just have the same skin color as you. But another important piece of context is for someone to be an up and coming lawyer, this means that they likely have some amount of privilege. This is not someone who grew up in the slums or who grew up within a lot of minority communities. This is likely someone with privilege in that community, which also further explains why they would prioritize themselves and their own families. So even if social good is important, we will explain that money matters more. And money matters more when you are able to help people through it, when you get to top levels of influence. The first argument is that this is necessary to be an adversarial lawyer to gain financial stability and long-term career growth. So there are a few reasons why you need to be adversarial. The first is that a few characteristics of being an adversarial lawyer. The first is that you have to take controversial or you're willing to take controversial clients. This means you're willing to be on the bankroll of oil companies when it comes to fighting against indigenous groups. This means you're willing to be on the side of maybe policemen or on the side of people who are ICE immigration officers. But secondly, it's that you worry less about the moral outcome of your cases. You just worry about being able to enact the law and defend your client and be able to get the profit out of that. There are three reasons as to why you cannot this is important. You cannot get any source of being able to be fulfilled or success through being a moral activist lawyer instead. And those two important characteristics are what get you that kind of level of success. So when you're a moral activist lawyer, the first characteristic is that you have to be up against very, very rich structures and likely elite people. Because a lot of the minorities that you're trying to defend or the people that you're trying to defend are on the victim side, which means you're going against the oppressors. You're going to lose those cases because these are states. You have to usually flip jurisprudence and convince judges to make very different outcomes and very different ways of being able to enact the law. This means that you have to spend an incredible amount of time per case to be able to convince people to enact justice in that sort of way. This means it's more likely that you will lose these cases. It's also just because you have probably less resources when you're defending these clients. Like when you're defending a mother who just immigrated into the US, they likely don't have enough money to give you to pay for hours for you to put into the case. This means that the people who are up against you will likely lead you to lose the case, or it's the firm that you're in that won't even take these cases to begin with. So it's either that you lose cases or you just don't have or you cannot access them. The second is that firms will just prefer more reliable lawyers, which makes it hard for you to compete in that sector of trying to get a job to begin with. When you are a law firm, you don't want your one of your partners to suddenly just decide to not opt into a case or not opt into helping a client because they have moral values at hand. You want a lawyer that is incredibly reliable because that means you can just slot them in anywhere. There's so many other lawyers in the US that you have to compete against that are likely from white backgrounds, that are likely also privileged, who will get these slots over you. And this is the most important part because there is likely less ways for you to be able to like take other job opportunities if you aren't a lawyer, and it's probably something that you care a lot about of getting a job in the first place in that field of law. But lastly, even if they give you arguments as to why there are more opportunities for like law firms that are progressive and law firms that are in favor of being able to help minorities. The problem is this will be based on reasons that are occurring on matter that is occurring right now. That maybe there are clashes of eyes in Chicago. Maybe there are a rise of somewhat democratic values. The problem is US politics is incredibly unreliable. It flips back and forth every few years. And this means it's a very unconvincing argument just to say that right now Democrats are back into power or will get back into power. This does not secure a long-term career or a long-term future for being able to protect minorities, which means that you cannot rely on that to like explain why you get success in the field of law. There are two impacts you get out of this. One is that you are less or you passed up on promotions, but secondly, it's just that you lose cases and do not earn money from being able to be a lawyer, which hurts your family and hurts you from being able to pursue your other interests as a person. Before I move on to the second argument, I'll take a point from closing.
Do you think you're more likely to get the opportunity to represent a very wealthy and famous person or the immigrant mother that you talk about?
So the problem there is it assumes that you will like be happy or get money from representing this person. When you're an up and coming lawyer, there are more opportunities for you to be able to take on these big clients in the first place because you have more like you aren't like politically biased towards this. On your side, you are stuck in defending these kinds of individuals who will not give you any money at all. So the second argument is to talk about why is this more likely going to fulfill you. There are three reasons as to why it's very taxing for you to always side on the side of minorities. The first is that it is just exhausting. You will be overworked. There are likely very few lawyers in this field. So if you argue that you will get these cases are incredibly hard to do. You will likely then resent the people that you're working for because they hurt your bank account and they also hurt you from time to time because you maybe you also get like in trouble with the law because people also want to target you. But second, it's just hard to gauge how much good you're doing in the world. Maybe you get one case out and you win one case, but that doesn't guarantee that this person won't break the law again, or this doesn't guarantee that this person actually will get protections in the future. So the viscerality of it is that you are always working with failure and structures against you. Lastly, it's just that you have very high expectations placed on you. This changes on our side because one, you can tell yourself it is not your fault and just focus on feeding your family and feeding yourself and say that it's justified. And lastly, that there are just other ways to be able to support or help people that you care about if you do care about your community.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech and to call upon the leader of the opposition to begin the case for opening opposition. Hear, hear.
Hey, am I visible and audible?
Yes,
Let me just set my timer. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first and crucial thing we need to address is the comparative of whether you care more about money or whether you care more about social justice, because if we resolve that comparative, we're logically prior to every other clash in the debate. So the question opening government asks is, why do you care about social justice to that extent? The reason why you care is the reason opening government tells you, that you care about the people most proximate to you. The people most proximate to you are your family and your friends who are most likely from the same ethnic group. Insofar as, unfortunately, cities are very often structured ethnically around ethnic neighborhoods and ethnic enclaves. The people you've played with on the playground, you went with to school, are from the same neighborhood, which means you've seen the law victimize your minority group. You've seen your friend being brutalized by the police because they thought he was reaching for a gun while he was reaching for his wallet. You've seen unequal sentencing where perhaps somebody your neighbor knows was sentenced to 5 years for possessing crack cocaine as opposed to powdered cocaine, which is supposed to be the same crime. You've seen the repealment of things like Roe versus Wade, and you are scared that the people from your group and who you care about are going to suffer. And this is crucial because you've seen also the perpetrators of those crimes go free, which means you were afraid on the streets. Even if you had privileges, opening government says, you were still afraid that you would be brutalized because you are part of that minority group. We think that's part of the reason you went to law school if you are from that minority, because you want to pursue justice. Obviously, money is a consideration. However, opening government themselves concedes that you most likely have privilege if you went to law school in the first place, so we simply get to articulate that concession on our side of the house. But there are two more things I have to say here. Number one, you're still an up-and-coming lawyer. Even if you didn't go to Harvard or Yale, although I do think the motion somewhat implies if you're an up-and-coming talent, the way we use that in the vernacular is that you are talented. You probably went to a solid law school, which means you're probably going to be headhunted by law firms because it is a competitive environment and they want to get the best lawyers. But also, we have the rise of pressure from social movements to have policies like affirmative action, plus the fact that law firms are very often seen as being cutthroat, not caring about justice. And because of the competitive environment, they want to get clients from diverse communities. So they want to whitewash their reputation, which means they're more likely to hire you because you are a social justice advocate lawyer. The volume of cases you're going to have is also pretty much going to be enough, because the amount of cases that are currently going on with the Trump administration, where we have the National Guard being deployed to cities, where we have ICE agents deporting people without due process. The number of cases involving minorities and the values you care about is massive, and perhaps it even pays more to be a lawyer that deals with those kinds of cases. And I think this is also crucial because your experience of law school, Trump or no Trump, was probably an experience where you were talked over, where the professor called over somebody else who was of another race than you simply because they were white, and it switched you likely to want to become a lawyer in this particular direction. Now, the primary thing opening government clashes with this is the idea of success and whether you can achieve success and you can achieve a sufficient amount of jobs and money. Two responses to this. Number one, this is empirically untrue. Even if you go against elite lawyers and elite representatives, there have been numerous cases where this has worked. Harvey Weinstein has gone down. Numerous people have gone down because of the Me Too movement. Most of the relevant cases in America, like Brown v. Board of Education, started from the federal courts and from the local level, which is to say there is still an opportunity for you to build yourself a name by taking on these elite cases. And I think even if you care primarily about yourself and your job, it's part of the excitement. Part of the excitement of being Zagreb and going up against Oxford or Harvard is exactly that, because you want to beat the big guys. That's what makes the job exciting for you, even if you primarily care about yourself. But secondly, on our side, you get to start small, because on our side, there will be ordinary people who are going to pick you as their representative because you know that you are from their group and they know that you care about their interests. Whereas it is quite unlikely on their side of the house, because they concede it's competitive, that you're going to be able to get the necessary volume of cases that you're going to win in order to ever progress to the more important cases. But thirdly, there's always demand for lawyering. There are always local law firms. There are always local companies that need a lawyer to represent them in local cases and local federal courts. This is not a glamorous job, but it is still a job which provides a solid amount of money, which means you are still able to provide for your family and still able to sustain yourself. But when the opportunity arises to do pro bono lawyering for the ACLU, or to be a public defender, or to fight for local reform, this is what also lets you sleep at night. So you're able to both get sustenance and feel good about yourself as a person. And this is the second part of my comparative. On their side of the house, they have the fiat to claim that you will try to be an adversarial lawyer. They don't have the fiat to claim that you will successfully come to terms with being an adversarial lawyer. Most people have a moral compass. Most people, even the evilest among us, believe murder is evil. Take this intuition pump. Wherever there is a genocide, like for example in Srebrenica or Rwanda, the way we talk about the victims, the way the perpetrators talk about the victims is as animals or as vermin, because even they cannot come to terms with killing a human. This is where it's important that you will have, in those elite cases they talk about, you will have to defend Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd. You will have to defend Andrew Tate, who sexually assaulted women. You will have to defend O.J. Simpson, who murdered his family, if you want to rise through the ranks and become a partner in this cutthroat environment. And you know you're looking for loopholes, not justice. And you know you're doing this just so you can get a murderer to get out of prison, which means they might kill again, which means you might be complicit in that crime. If O.J. says it's so hard to come to terms with, failing a member of your minority, is it easier to come to terms with letting a murderer go free? They have to answer that comparative before that closing government.
Do you believe that every person from minority have obligation to act 24/7 for the purpose and the well-being of their community?
This is irrelevant as to whether that's an objective claim or not. So far as I explained to you, why you as an individual, given it's an actor motion, think you have that obligation, we explain that you do. To further the point I'm making, there's also client-attorney privilege, right? Which means that your client has revealed to you things they have not revealed to the court, which means you talk to these individuals every day, which means you know the atrocities Ted Bundy did, for example, to the women he raped and murdered, which means that every day you look in these people's eyes and you know they're not supposed to go free. And then you have to find a justification. What is that justification? justification. It's my job? Sure, I could have chosen another. They deserve representation? Yes, as per the word of the law. But do they really? Do they morally? Insofar as I prove to you that most every person has a moral compass, or at least the average one we're debating about, you ultimately feel like shit. We prove you might have less money. We also give evidence why you will have money, but even if you do have less money, it's enough to sustain your family. We prove you sleep peacefully at night. Note it's an actor motion. Every person wants to think they're a good person because that's what keeps us going. Because if we're not a good person, then we think our life doesn't make sense and we judge ourselves every day. This is the most all-encompassing impact of the round, clearly opening opposition.
I'd like to thank the LO for that fine speech and to call upon the DPM to conclude the opening government case. Hear, hear.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Even if you came from a minority community, the fact is you are privileged. You lived separate from these people. You lived in a gated community. You lived in a suburban area. You studied with international students and people who are so ethnically and by race and by definition different from the people within your community. It is this privilege that notably separates you from caring about these people, from having similar advocacies, because the lived experience you had since childhood was something separate from those who are most vulnerable. First question I want in this debate answered is, do you actually care about these individuals? And does it weigh higher than your own self-expectations of yourself and your own need for things like money? The first claim we explained to you is that you are separate and you lived separate from these individuals precisely because of your upbringing. You came from elite spaces, you lived separately from these individuals, and that by effect means the proximity you had with them is completely different. Maybe you do care about your family. The fact is that these people were also symmetrically rich. They also had their own self-interest, and in fact, to send you to school were probably corrupt in themselves. The morals that you built up by being built in this neighborhood and by being built in this type of childhood is completely different from these individuals. Secondly, it is the self-reputation and self-expectations you have for yourself. We explained to you that maybe you don't need as much money, but the fact is you want more money. You want the success. You crave it. One, because you're an up-and-coming lawyer. You studied maybe in Harvard and Yale, like they want to explain, and that by effect creates an expectation for you within yourself to be as successful, to work the big guys, to have the best clients, to make as much money as possible. But also, it is your family who expects you to give back to them, who expects you that you are as successful as they expect you to these insanely expensive schools. That explains to you why maybe you can survive and live off a normal wage under their comparative. The problem is you are not satisfied monetarily, nor are your selfish interests fulfilled under this comparative. This outweighs any meaningful argument that comes from opposition, because yourself is the most proximate interest in comparison to other people in your communities. You probably care more about yourself fulfilling your needs and your own expectations prior to caring about other people outside of you. Insofar as you don't fulfill that, then that's something that doesn't necessarily weigh as much on you. Probably your priority is this. The second thing they say is, well, you're going to hate your job. The first thing is just let's be charitable. Everyone hates their jobs, right? Clearly, corporate workers hate their job, but still forego their morals for money because they believe it to be more important towards them. You might also hate your job by working for these individuals because you're overworked, you're stressed, the amount of cases that you have, and the dissatisfaction you have with not being able to change the world, without being able to have law reform, is probably still something that disappoints you. On either comparative, at best what you can believe with this is that you are likely to be disappointed and feel immoral regardless. The difference is how you're able to consolidate this idea by getting things like more money, or at the very least working towards yourself and propping up your own career, which presumably is more important to you. But secondly, we'd contend and flip this idea. You probably could still feel good as an adversarial lawyer. For one, you don't care about the attributes of your clients, which also means maybe you get a criminal from someone who's a minority. Presumably, you'd still work for them regardless, as long as they're able to pay you this money. You can still represent people who you might want to feel justified in, or who might feel morally justified in representing, like people who committed crimes of necessity, like rich people who were just wrongly accused of crimes and whatnot. That also explains that there's still some level of you being able to help these individuals. But secondly, adversarial lawyers are able to find some meaning of morality with the idea of just giving people fair cases. It is the idea that you can just be able to exhibit some moral good or some moral fairness within court cases by just giving people the opportunity to lead them, or by giving people the opportunity of just and fair representation. This means that in your head, you can still justify it as morally good. You justify it as you still helping these individuals by giving them a proper case, by being the best lawyer, and that by effect means you're still satisfied morally. What I'm going to explain next, therefore, is why as a minority lawyer, you face unique challenges. And specifically because you're up and coming, it requires you to take these types of cases under the definition of an adversarial lawyer. The first is you are already inherently seen as biased on the basis of your skin color by basis of your ethnicity. That is, a lot of people are already currently criticizing you because you were born under this community. That is to say, there are more eyes on you. It is clients who are unsure if you're going to give them a fair case and whether or not they're willing to hire you or send you off to a case in instances where they are corporate leaders or where they are in elite spaces who benefit from actively taking down vulnerable individuals. It is law firms who are less willing to hire you insofar as it seems like you still care about these individuals, and they're more willing to hire the white person who graduated from Harvard regardless. Or it is bar committees who are less willing to engage you in more controversial cases because they believe that you are more biased and therefore give this opportunity to someone else. All of this explains to you, one, that you are more criticized, which is exclusive because law firms are neutral and they take often those who pay the most. Often, if you want more money, it comes from elite spaces. It comes with law firms that have little access from minorities because of things like price, corporate lobbying, and things like the connections that they have. But secondly, you need to build your reputation through wins. And this is mostly important. Before that, I guess I'll take a few answers.
Yeah, your case is internally inconsistent because you say these people are so privileged minorities, but at the same time, you say these people are less likely to be hired from law firms and face the discrimination. Choose one.
I mean, like, you're a moral activist, right? So even if you had the option, like, to go to these high law firms, presumably you'd choose the indigenous people to defend instead of going to these law firms. Like, that's a choice that you take because you're a moral activist. The last one is that you need to build reputation through wins. This was crucial. In order for you to believe any argument that comes from opposition, you have to believe that you can actually win these cases, that you can build a reputation and therefore scale into the future and even feel good about it. We explained to you this is crucial. There's little explanation for as to why you are going to be successful in helping these individuals. Most ICE agents and most pro bono law firms are unable to help most immigrants and they end up deported regardless. Most individuals are unable to resolve problems of the law because of mass amounts of corporate lobbying and researches and research against you. It is things like people fighting against you or mass amounts of corporate machinery that stop you from attaining your goals. This is terrible on two levels. The first is you are never able to actually scale into the future, which is important because your reputation is on the line as an up-and-coming lawyer. If you constantly lose cases, if you don't win them, or if you only win small ones, it's unlikely you're able to accrue any means of benefit of scale in the future. But secondly, it's not like you feel good. You constantly feel like a failure, which is exactly what Kara told you. It is you not being able to win and help these individuals, you not being able to stop deportations. And at that point, you feel like you've been a moral failure. Even if you didn't believe all of these things, we explained to you that there's no end to this idea of morality. There's always an injustice in the world that you have to change. There's always a problem in the world that you need to resolve. And insofar as you're unable to resolve all these things, presumably the first requisite for you is to feel disappointed with yourself, to never feel satisfied. This is a terrible life. We'd rather you bury your morals because morals were never that important anyways.
I'd like to thank the DPM for that fine speech and to call upon the DLO to conclude the opening opposition case and the top half of this debate. Hear, hear.
Okay, I assume I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. It's much better as a lawyer after a long day for me to come at home and be able to look myself in the mirror and know that I even try to help a black man being convicted to go to prison, rather than maybe having a bit more money on their side. First thing I want to talk about is what amount of money are you going to make on either side, because I think that proposition kind of assumes that you're going to make way more money on their side without having any sort of mechanism on their side. Firstly, notice that on both sides you're going to have a lot of cases that you can take. Still on our side, you're still helping people, and you still have the ability to provide services, especially like in the status quo, where we now have like a higher value of volume cases. That means you have like a lot of like divorces where you still have to talk about like a woman being beaten by her husband and then helping her. There's still like a lot of sexual assault, a lot of immigrants that you help. That means based on the like volume of cases alone, you can still make money like from the government or from those private cases. We tell you that on their side, in order to be an adversarial lawyer, in order to make a lot of money that they talk about, you need to have a lot of connections. You have to not be discriminated based on your skin. You have to work for the big guns who do not want to employ you because they are inherently racist, because you do not have nepotistical connections. That means on their side, it is also like very hard to win those cases, because it is not likely that you're going to get these cases just out of college. Those that you're a minority student who just came into the world. That means that at that point, you're not going to feel that money hitting your bank account. You're firstly going to feel yourself like sinking into depression because you're seeing like rapists walking out of the prisons and not going there. That means at first on Wank, you're going to feel firstly a lot worse, and then maybe in the future, but it's very uncertain, you're going to get the case that is going to bring you, I don't know, $10,000 by case, which is like very low on likelihood. Secondly, you're not likely to get these cases because you are a minority person. Notice at the point where you are representing someone for like being a racist or whatever, they probably not want to have you as a lawyer because they're not able to open your soul to them. They're probably also inherently racist to you, so they do not want to cooperate with you as a company or as an individual. And C, you do not need for you to have like all of these like cases, you have to have a lot of connections. This is also very unlikely at the point where you come from a minority background. You do not know these people. They do not want to have you in your circles. You're going against all of these people. That means that at that point you still make money. On our side, it is not highly unlikely that you're going to make so much more money on their side to be able to explain to yourself why you are still a bad person. Secondly, we tell you that you still also have a lot of opportunities on our side to go to the higher value cases, because the thing says it is easier like to enter maybe a case on like a local level and then work your way up to federal levels, such as R.V. Wade and all these things, who first were like very small cases, but then in the future they grew up. Okay, second thing I want to talk about is like the privilege of this minority lawyer. Firstly, notice that kind of proposition assumes that they are like to be privileged, because notice there are a lot of cases that you can still go to law school without like being super rich. You can like have a scholarship, you can like take out a small loan, you can like work a summer and then go to college. All of these things happen, and people do not need to be inherently privileged. But now let's go on to the best case scenario proposition. Even if you're like privileged part of a minority, there are 4 reasons why we're still going to take care about the community. Because firstly, you probably still experience racism to some extent. It is like because even though you are a man, like maybe a black man, and you like drive a nice car, you're still more likely to be stopped by the police and then being searched by your trunk and like being investigated. Oh, did you steal this car? Do you have drugs on you? And being like really harassed by those people. That means that at some point in your life, you probably experienced racism on your skin. Secondly, even if you didn't experience racism, your parents probably did, because they are older and they lived in even worse times where racism was even like more accepted in society. That means at the point where you're growing up, they're probably very overprotective of you. They're probably telling you, oh, do not speak Spanish when you're on this street, because people are still going to jump you on these things. That means you also internally know about racism. You internally know that this is a problem. Thirdly, why you chose to be a lawyer. At 18, you probably did maybe want to make some money, but you also had to finish a very, very hard school. That means at some point you had to have some sort of internal motivation of helping people. The most proximal people that you can connect on this basis is the minority people that you know a lot of examples of like being harassed. Fourthly, throughout law school, you probably learned about a lot of like research, a lot of analysis about the mistreatment of minorities. That means at that point, we're seeing the pictures of the people lying this way, coughing blood only because they're black and the police officer thought that they had drugs on them. At that point, you're much more likely to connect to them, especially because you're the same minority and same skin color. We tell you that this is enough because you're firstly always going to have the color of your skin on you and then the money that you have in your bank account. That means you're much more connected to your people, to your culture, all of these things. Before I go on, POI from closing.
I'll take you at your best. You sorted one structural problem. There are still 99 problems. When are you fulfilled? When is your job done?
You're not like maybe solving like structural problems of society. You're not maybe saying that like abortion is going to like now be allowed in the United States. You're solving the problem of people on the ground and you see their faces as being lit up at the point where you maybe win a case. You're going to win some case. Okay, this is my second point. Why are you going to win some cases? Because notice it is not so hard to win all these cases. You're not going to go to the federal level and then try to like unleash something and like make everything like so inherently different. You're literally going to help a local man fight in court because he was stopped without the probable cause. You're helping a woman who was beaten up by her husband to get more time with her kids and to not make the husband see their kids at that point. That means it is not very hard to win those cases. You're maybe going to lose some, but you're still going to win as a stay a very like big amount. Because notice on weighing, at the point where you win this case, you're going to feel much more fulfillment because you know that people who deserve it are getting what they deserve. On their side, if you're adversarial lawyer, in the long term, you're going to accumulate much more harm, much more regret, because you now see a world as a negative place. That means that every point when I go outside the park, when I have maybe my kids, when I have a daughter at the future, I know that the people who are rapists are now going to be now are more likely to walk free because of me, because I also internally see that other lawyers probably think the same way as I do. That means they're also helping the rapists, that they're going outside freely. That means I look at the world at a worst case. Even if I lose cases of like people I don't know being immigrants and not getting their green cards, at least I know that there are people and that there are people that I work with who are also winning those cases. That means I'm going to perceive the world in a more positive way. It is much better to have that than I don't know a couple more bucks in bank account. So proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for that fine speech, and to remind speakers to go under 7 minutes and 15 seconds, and to call upon the member of government to begin the closing government case and the closing half of this debate. Hear.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Opening opposition cannot have it all. They can start their speeches by saying that you care about social justice because you have a structural problems, because people are being affected by the police brutality, because you are seeing perpetrators going free, and then saying that you will be okay if you will have this help just this one person, you will be content, or you will be happy, or you will move with your life. I think it's extremely hard. I think the extension from closing government is very simple. What you are making is irreversible choice which affect the rest of your life, because it's extremely hard to back down, or it's extremely hard to find happiness or satisfaction from your job, because even if you will succeed and if you will save this one woman, you will win this one case, another 5 women will stand in the line to you because they will believe that you can save them all. What if you will lose on the other side, right? People will not say thank you to you for not tangible impact, for you letting them down. They will just thank you for trying. But what you are getting from trying, right? It's extremely hard for me to see on which moment you are getting mental rest on side opening opposition, and why as an individual you should subject yourself to working 24/7, to being emotionally connected to these cases, to these cases dictating your mood, dictating how happy you are in your life, and taking this as its finest. I think the issue with top half is that they are very contingent on the likelihood of success or a lot of factors. I don't know if you will get a chance to defend Ted Bundy, which is the best case of all, that you will get the worst possible crimes in order to defend. I don't know how privileged you are, but I think what it's certain in this case It's that you will certainly fail, you will win some cases, you will certainly lose some cases, and then people will still try to come to you and be like, if you did that once, because there is this pressure of social movements, which Tin is talking about in his speech, right? If the pressure existing, and if you are the one that you dictating that you are willing to fight for us, then the people will be using you again, and they will be coming back and being like, oh, you know, you sorted this one issue, here is the second issue, here is the third issue, here is the fourth issue, don't give up, you should try to do this again. And the problem is that if we're listing so many issues which were happening structurally, the one person and this one choice which we're making, it's extremely hard. On comparative on our side of the house, you can still care about your community. You can donate money. You can protect. You can, for example, subsidize the foundations. You can still pay the other people. You can invite your friends from your neighborhood and trying to create, I don't know, neighborhoods watch, where you can try to advocate or like voting for the parties which want to defund the police. It's unclear why your obligation can only be executed by what you are doing, what you're dedicating your life to, and what you are dedicating your career to. And then we are hearing from DLO that when you look in the mirror, you will be a happy person. No, but what if you will lose the case? You will see yourself as a failure, that these people had faith in you, that you were not good enough, that you were unable to beat the system, and you are getting demotivated. And if you will lose another case, it's like, why did I pick this faith? Can I even try to combat this? It's unclear to me how you are keeping going when you are structurally losing, or when you are unable to get the success on opening opposition, which means that you stop being effective, you stop enjoying your life, or this relatives, this close family which you still have on our side of the house. But thirdly, we think that you have a ways to rationalize to yourself the choice of government side in this debate, right? Because you are used to injustice. You saw your relatives, you saw your generations in the past being subject of the injustice. You're seeing injustice all the way on the streets. So you can rationalize that if people are accepting this injustice, if the society in which you are living in, and if the majority of people do not doing anything about this, or like do not doing enough, if there is collective action problem, maybe it's not terrible to kind of participate in this, or at least not hate yourself every day as opening opposition is claiming, right? Which means that you can mitigate that you are not being the most morally correct and wrong and person. We want this lawyer to be like like Jokic. Job is done, match is gone. Let's now move on to the different part in the life which you can find your happiness and enjoyment. It's unclear why you can't do this on our side of the house. Before I will move on,
On both sides, you start small, sometimes win, sometimes lose. And on both sides, you know the personal stories of your clients. So the only comparative is, do you go home knowing you let home a crooked cop, or at least this one mother who gets to get home to her kids?
No, but on my side of the house, I know this case. I'm coming home. I'm putting this case out of my brain. I'm going to enjoy time with my family. I don't need to sit and try to do research and trying to go and combat the laws. I'm not looking for the organizations to try to support my cause. I'm not sitting and writing posts on the social media trying to find other lawyers trying to support my case. I'm not trying to organize protests in front of the parliament, because in order to achieve any of the changes which opening opposition is trying, there is a massive effort which you need to do. On my side of the house, okay, I will hear some of the personal stories of my client, but I don't care. I don't treat them as my friends. I don't treat them as my family. I don't treat them as my neighborhoods. I can't be responsible for thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. I know that I'm only responsible for myself, or for my close relatives, and what I am capable to do as a person, not taking the burden of the generations on your own shoulder. In that case, I think didn't have the response to the first POI, which I'm asking, that no, but I give you the analysis why you are likely to think that you care about this. If you are correct, and people will be making these choices, every single minority person would decide to go and fight in that kind of in that kind of profession. Second of all, everyone from the minorities will be going up on the streets and risking their safety, risking their personal belonging, risking their profession, risking their job, and will not stop until the job is done and keep the motivation. But we let people to make their own choices and trying to maybe prioritize their current situation, or maybe we accept that people might have different priorities, same as people will not come to you and be like, hey, You are a lawyer. You are a person of color. Who did you defend it yesterday? That's not the discussion daily which you are actually happening, right? You still can be your person. You still can be supportive. You don't necessarily need to do this being connected to your money, being connected to your future, being connected to the career, and thinking about this all the time. So panel, I think the most important and the most valuable extension in this round is as follows. If you will choose the path of opening opposition, it's unclear if you can ever retire, if you can ever rest when you're coming back home, how much actually you can achieve in order to even smile to yourself by the end of the day, by the end of the year, and how proud you can be from yourself. On our side of the house, you have lower burden of happiness. You are trying to find the things which you have more control over, and you are not trying to put on yourself additional and extra moral obligations, which is unclear where is the limit of this, specifically in the society which is so problematic as US, therefore CG.
I'd like to thank the member of government for that fine speech and to call upon the member of opposition to begin the case for closing up. Hear, hear.
Hey, am I visible and audible? Okay. Just a few seconds. POIs in the chat, probably take OG. Here's the problem with the top half clash on how you feel about yourself. Firstly, it's highly dependent on speculative characterization about the personality and background of this individual. Is your neighborhood filthy rich and gentrified, or is it actually connected to average minority people on the ground? Are you a selfish person raised to only prioritize elitism and climbing up the social ladder, or are you altruistic because you interact with disprivileged people on the ground? None of this conclusively tips in favor of opening government or opening opposition. The second and more damning problem is that, as OG points out, you can control how you feel about yourself. You develop coping mechanisms that tell you I'm a moral person because I'm pursuing some version of justice, which is why on both sides of the house, you probably do feel good about yourself. It is just very, very bad for someone to go back every home, think about their work and be sad, which is why they naturally develop psychological coping mechanisms and motivated reasoning to help them explain why the work they're doing is valuable. Even if some losses occur when you're a moral lawyer, you view this as just necessary failures in a long, because the arc of justice is long, but it gradually bends in the favor of the correct direction. When you lose cases as an adversarial lawyer, you go back home and just tell yourself that you'll win other cases in the future, and that you're defending justice by presenting the most persuasive case in favor of your client, which explains that you can control everything top half talks about, and your psychological coping mechanisms do exist. What you cannot control is, firstly, whether your body is sending you warning signals and whether you become severely ill or depressed, and secondly, whether you have a job in the long run. That's going to be the extensions for closing opposition. First, you're going to experience severe burnout on their side of the house and feel intense pressure when you're at work. A couple of reasons for this. Mechanism one, you're directly in competition with all other adversarial lawyers when you become one adversarial lawyer, because all people who want to be defended look at the rate of success. It is a direct metric of competition. If someone else has a higher rate of success, your client probably pivots towards them. This has three implications. One, every loss makes you feel miserable and paranoid. It means your rate of success decreases. You get fewer future cases. You get reduction in income. You can't sleep at night over this loss. Second, every other lawyer that you work with, that you see every day, is your competitor. You view them with hostility. And there's often an up and out system in most major law firms, which means as more and more new lawyers enter the industry, because, this industry is gradually quite hyped and a lot of young people want to make money, every day without a case is the day where newer lawyers are out competing you, where your relative position within the law firm declines. So you feel incredibly paranoid about every loss and every day you spend without a case. Third, on the comparative, there's far less competition on our side because minority communities have far less lawyers who are willing to represent them, who want to just take the personal trade-off of earning less money in favor of justice. You're far more collaborative in your relationship with your coworkers because you're both trying to defend specific minority groups of people. Losses are bad, but they don't threaten your career. This is why you feel far better on our side. Mechanism two, as an up-and-coming lawyer, you're at a disadvantage because your initial experience and rate of success is zero compared to more senior lawyers in the firm. Therefore, to get the same cases they get, to match them in terms of your CV, the only way to compensate for your advantage is by working harder and staying for longer hours in the office, is by staying up all night to write your case and to defend your client. This means you get very unreasonable working hours. Number 3, you work for powerful clients on their side of the house. These are powerful people who can who are incredibly wealthy and well-connected, who can exert pressure over you, which means these people will tell you, you should feel privileged and honored to defend me and get my case, which is why you should work long hours and not go to sleep. And you will lose lots of opportunities if this person dislikes you or if you fail to defend this person, because this person is very well-connected. Versus minority communities are just grateful and glad that you're representing them on our side because no one else is willing to do it. So you feel better about your work, you have more reasonable working hours on our side of the house, you're threatened by your client on their side. The final mechanism here is you experience threats and hatred from the public. Note that you can easily get cancelled on Twitter, you can easily get doxxed online with status quo technology, which means that the victim's family, for instance, often would, out of irrationality or vigilantism desires, do things like dox you or attack you online, and you're on the receiving end of a lot of cyber violence because you're perceived as defending the person who is in a position of power. What is the impact of this? 1, you're just physically in pain when you overwork and are always under stress when you're at work. You develop chronic diseases because you lack sleep. The fact that your university is stressful doesn't mean you want your life to be permanently stressful. You probably don't want to be very, very ill in your old age. Second, that means there's far more career stability on our side because you're far less likely to be out-competed just because you've had like 1 year dry period where you don't get lots of cases, or you've had a few unfortunate losses, which then just led to you being an unpopular lawyer who's unable to make an income, who gets demoted in the law firm. Second extension, you get far more income on our side because their side is far more subject to replacement by AI and automation. Note that AIs will develop incredibly fast on both sides of the house. First, it's a very hyped up industry with huge amounts of investment. Meta scientists are paid hundreds of millions. States have incentives to invest in AI because of the tech race. Second, because of the scaling law, as more and more synthetic data is generated, as people explore different modalities of data, the quality of models increase empirically in proportion to the amount of data people are able to access. Third, because of Moore's law, computational costs keep expanding. This all explains that the trend of AI getting substantially better every year will continue in the next couple of decades. What this means is, in the future, artificial intelligence is able to perform tasks done by lawyers in status quo, things like collecting and compiling evidence, writing cases, writing arguments, citing precedents. Therefore, why are adversarial lawyers on their side far more likely to be replaced by AI than on our side of the house? 4 reasons. First, on their side, you're likely to work for large law firms that are exclusively profit-oriented, whereas we often work for state institutions as public defendants or work for local firms and communities. This means adversarial lawyers work for firms that are firstly more obsessive about cutting costs. They're often taken over by private equity because they're the best firms that only stay on top of the industry because they aggressively expand and cut everyone that could be replaceable. Second, these firms are more knowledgeable about AI because they're wealthier, they have more capacity to adopt AI because they're wealthier, they can negotiate better deals with OpenAI, for instance. This explains their job is far more likely to be replaced just by the nature of the institutions they're working for. Second, our work is far more subjective. Their work is a constraint optimization problem. You find the best case, you identify the best loopholes. On our side, there's far more subjectivity. You need to be the arbiter of justice and have a sense of what is just and unjust. You need to listen to your client and open yourself up to them, telling them what is the moral thing to do. You're often trying to obtain sympathy for the small guy by appealing to emotions. These are skills that are not replaceable by the compiling evidence and building case capacity of AI. Third reason, our work is far more based on charisma because you need to get minority clients to trust you. You need to reach out to people involved in class action lawsuits and convince them to serve as witnesses. You need to secure funding from political organizations. This is not easily replaceable by AI as writing cases. Finally, our work often involves establishing precedents and defenses that are novel because existing defenses for the small guy or for the minority community often doesn't exist and doesn't tend to win in court. So our job requires more innovation, which is far less replaceable. This means we get a career in the long run. They don't have one. We get far more career stability. We're very happy to oppose.
I'd like to thank the member of opposition for that fine speech and to call upon the government whip. Here.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to check whether I'm both audible and visible. Perfect. So I'll be starting my speech shortly. The first observation I would like to make about closing opposition's case is that it's clearly symmetrical. i.e., I think most of the reasons apply to their case as well. I think, first of all, on the opposition side, you try to build your position just as much because you also needed to get high-profile clients, because you also needed to like build your CV, because you also needed to get hired by a good law firm, which enables you to even be successful under opposition metrics, which enables you to even like get those high-profile cases, to be able to win something that actually has a huge moral impact, that actually you treat as like, in some ways, fulfilling to yourself. I think on your side, then you're just as likely to get overworked. Secondly, then, I think very similarly, AI most likely replaces everyone if it does, because those state institutions that you supposedly work for on their side of the house also lack funds and also probably want to cut costs. I would argue that even lack funds even more than those like like huge law firms, which probably care about prestige stemming from hiring human lawyers, thus like are like able to splurge on like maybe hiring humans instead of AI. I would argue that if someone wants to replace you with AI, that's most likely state firms, but I don't think that's necessarily on Clash. Secondly, then, I think that on our side of the house, you're way less likely to actually get overworked, because at the point at which you're actually choosing the moral framework of prioritizing your own comfort, of prioritizing the ability to earn money, of prioritizing the ability to like basically prioritize your own career, your own family, your own surroundings, etc. I think that at this point, you basically enable yourself to prioritize your comfort at the point at which you feel that you need it. This means that on our side of the house exclusively, you basically mentally enable yourself to actually like step back when you feel that the career is taking too high of a toll from you. Secondly, then, I think that the difference between our and their side doesn't necessarily even have to be in the number of hours worked, but it is necessarily in the mental toll that stems from those hours that you worked. First of all, I think even if you work the exact same amount of time, only in opposition is your identity and your perception of yourself, basically of like your morality, etc., basically hinged on the successes you're having. I think that even if you're working for the exact same amount of time, only on their side of the house are you so stressed, are you so like personally invested into actually achieving this success, into actually like winning those cases. Secondly, then, I think this also looks like people that approach you treating you differently. I think that on our side of the house, when you're doing extra work for your clients, they probably pay you more. You probably feel like this amount of fulfillment from basically like being able to give more to your clients. On their side of the house, there's this constant sense of like the lack of fulfillment from like the like constant stream of clients who you aren't necessarily able to help. I think then on their side of the house, even if you like worked less hours, which I don't think is plausible, you still feel like that the mental toll is way higher on you. I think that therefore on their side of the house, it necessarily leads to like an irreversible lack of fulfillment. That being said, first of all, let's weigh Claudia's speech. Second of all, let's rebut opening opposition more directly. So weighing Claudia's speech, I think she basically takes the opposition side at their best, i.e. she tells you that even if you are successful as a moral activist liar, then through the time, through the effort, through the emotional toll, this is necessarily the work that is like way harder for you, that is basically like really, really unreasonable to take. We tell you that it is that sacrificing yourself to a cause, making this your career, treating this as a person of your life, that's an inherently massive burden and one that no rational actor actually wants to take. I think that this burden is not one that opposition sides are able to prove to us. Weighing this then specifically against opening government. First of all, I think the case is basically better because it's independent from success, but also independent from the exact psychological profile of the person engaged in those things, independent from the exact like ways in which you're getting fulfillment, independent of the exact ways at which you are or are not likely to like win or lose cases, you're likely or not to like feel successful, etc. Secondly, then I think our case basically shows a way clearer impact on you as an individual. What the openings tells you is basically stopping at the level of like the feelings you feel about yourself, and I think that it's really unclear how hard it is to deal with all that, how hard it is to deal with feelings that are maybe not perfectly moral, that are maybe not perfectly successful, that are maybe not a perfect actor. The comparative in Claudia's speech then is telling you how this actually puts a toll on every single aspect of your life, on your family life, on your free time, etc. I think those are like necessarily more tangible. Before moving on to our rebuttal, yeah, let's take opening.
If the environment is as competitive as government describes, on both sides it's probably hard to succeed. You have to get lucky to get a landmark case or whatever. The comparative is then on your side, you only measure yourself on that success, which is hard to achieve. On ours, at least there is solace in being a pro bono lawyer, a public defender, or
I
winning
think
a case
on
for
your
a person
side
you
of the
care
house,
about.
if you're losing cases as this pro bono lawyer, you necessarily feel as yourself as the bad actor. I am the person who has fucked this person over. I am the person who wasn't able to win their case. I am the person who wasn't able to help them. I think at this point, like on your side, necessarily it has to be contingent on success, because on your side, necessarily, you need to like be able to see the extent to which you've helped these people. We tell you why this extent is really, really unlikely on your side of the house. Now moving on to like directly rebutting opening opposition, two major cases there. First of all, you caring about moral justice. I think that that this is generally only the sole reason opening a position gives us to this case is basically while you're so proximate to this minority background. Let's flip this case quickly. I think that you're really likely to think about yourself away from the minority. You're really likely to feel the opposite of the obligation for this minority. First of all, not how being part of this minority is always mentally connected to the hardships. It's the minority identity that forces you to undergo difficulties, i.e. you're very likely to think of it as something bad. But then secondly, and more importantly, in order to achieve success, you most likely needed to step away from this background mentally to cut yourself away from it. This looks like breaking through stereotypes. This looks like actively proving to the people around you that you're not like the other people from this minority, that you're able to basically step away from this background. Secondly, this looks like, I don't know, being in law school, hanging out with the people from more privileged backgrounds, having to fit into such groups, once again, having to prove to yourself and other people around you that you're not necessarily having to build your identity on the minority group that you're part of. This means that most likely you no longer think of yourself as one from that minority. I am not who I am because I am from the minority background, but rather despite it. This means that on the opposition side, you most likely don't want to do things that strictly connect your identity to your background, i.e. you're very likely to feel worse in opening up when you're actually sacrificing yourself to the cause that you don't necessarily feel has shaped you, that you have had to mentally cut yourself away from for your whole life. Second, and I think stronger point on opening a position then, is the idea of, well, you're going to think of yourself as a bad person if you are this adversarial lawyer on our side of the house. I think that this notion then is really empirically absurd. Panel, everyone justifies their job to themselves somehow. You tell yourself that the people you defended were shaped by circumstances and are in fact victims too for some reason. You tell yourself that you can't change anything anyway. You tell yourself that you're sacrificing for your kids, family, friends, for the people in your direct proximity. If this wasn't what was empirically happening around us, then most likely half of the debaters wouldn't work in consulting for big evil MNCs, but would rather sacrifice themselves to activism. I don't think either of you in this room does that, because I think empirically people just try to justify the things they do to themselves. This means that most likely the moral toll is inexistent regardless of which job path you do. So panel, for avoiding the most tangible impact and the mental toll that this job would bring to you on the opposition side, please vote closing off.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that fine speech and to call upon the op whip.
Hi, am I clearly visible and audible?
Yes to both.
Okay. I'll take POIs verbally. So please just unmute yourself to raise POIs. I don't think I'll be able to see the chat. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The United States is one of the countries that are adopting AI the fastest, and it is the countries that is going to replace a lot of their jobs with AI the fastest. I think the most certain impact in this debate is that a lot of even if you're the most privileged, the most successful lawyer that has the most talents, I just think you're very more likely to be replaced by AI and a lot of these things that are happening. So I think even if we take OG and GovBench at their best, these people are just simply likely to be replaced if you advocate for adversarial lawyer that is far more likely to lose to AI lawyers. I think the most important clash is obviously about the replaceability, because you need to have unique characteristics and unique things that are irreplaceable by artificial intelligence. That's the way you actually preserve your career. You're able to get any other benefits, or you need to succeed everything that government wants to claim. The first clash is simply about replaceability, and I'm going to explain why we win on this. But second of all, I'm going to engage with closing government about their burnout and exhaustion, because I think closing government's extension is only that your constant issues are going to arise. You are now pressured to work for 24 hours, and that's simply bad. But there's several problems with this claim. The first is that this is deeply uncomparative, because adversarial lawyers are also very competitive. You also have a lot of criminal cases. You probably, in order for you to survive in this competitive environment, you also have to work 24 hours equally in order for you to win cases against elites and other lawyers who have better educational chances, or a lot of these things means that you still need to engage in very competitive practices. But the second response is, I just think adversarial lawyers are more contingent on success because if you are an adversarial debater, for example, you care more about wins and losses rather than what kind of speeches you give or what kind of cases you actually do. On the comparative, moral activists are more likely to care about the fact that you represented this minority, what you actually did, the connections you actually established, and the fact that you just tried to advocate for social justice is exactly the reason why people are less likely to be contingent on success. That's the reason why closing government does not engage with the metric given by opening opposition. But the fourth and last reason is, I just think it's more likely that these people are less likely to these people care more about social justice, not because your families and your more proximate people were hurt and were discriminated in the process, but it's more likely that also these privileged minorities from backgrounds do care about minorities that they never met or they never actually had any connections with, because a lot of these privileged minorities also know that, hey, I'm even if I'm an African American, the fact that I'm able to get all of these prestigious things comes at the expense of other Black communities that had to sacrifice a lot of things for me. And that means that, hey, even though I never met these people in my life, the fact that I'm getting all these privileges at the expense of other people and the expense of other Black people that exist around me means that I'm more likely to care about these people, even though I never met them before. And I also feel a moral grave responsibility for these people. That's the reason why a lot of people just do devote a lot of their donations to minority communities that they actually never met. But also it's the case that, hey, a lot of people just care about these people inherently. So I think this is a mechanism that is distinct from opening opposition, who thinks that connection is the only way for you to actually relate to these people. But the second thing I want to talk about is why replaceability is the most important. Ricky gives you a bunch of mechanisms as to why adversarial lawyers are more replaceable. We simply hear no engagement. Because opening opposition says, because I think like AI and automation means that you're better at memorizing all the bunch of laws and legislations you need to memorize. AI can do this far better than the average person. You simply have less cost to enact. You also can make these AI lawyers work 24 hours and exploit them, which means that there are far more incentives to companies to replace these human lawyers with AI and automation. This takes OG at their best, because even if you're the most privileged person, still you can't outcompete AI in the future, which means that you are obviously going to be replaced. I would argue that moral activist lawyers are far more less replaceable, because we give you reasons like AI does not have the experience of discrimination. You don't have heart-rendering speeches, but it's also the case that AI is often racially biased because they're more likely to say Black people are more likely to commit crimes, less likely to defend them. You have less evidence and rhetoric to do that, means that you're very going to be bad at defending minorities. But it's also the people's perception that, hey, I want the same person from my same ethnicity, or the person that has the same skin color that can best represent me. The people's perception actually backlashes when it's actually people who often want these minority people to represent themselves. That's the reason why people prefer them. There are two impacts to this. Firstly, you're more likely to succeed because you have the skills and characteristics that are irreplaceable. Minorities who seek for a lawyer who can best represent and defend them are more likely to seek for these active lawyers and up-and-coming lawyers for the same minority community. That's the reason why you are likely to get all of these cases about ICE deportation or immigrants, because people actually think you're the best person to represent yourself. The second impact is that you're the only and exclusive actor willing to fight against minorities. You establish more connection with liberal communities and the Democratic Party in the United States, who has the most incentive to fight back against Trump and ICE deportation and all of the things that are happening in the status quo. You get more funding even if you lose, because Democratic Party wants you to constantly activist for minorities and protect these people against the Trump administration, which is, even if you do lose cases, you're still likely to get funding and a sustainable amount of the income that the Democratic Party actually offers to you. You also establish connections to the high officials with high positions, because these are likely to happen because you're the only actor that is capable of doing this, and the only renowned popular actor that is actually able to do this. You're more likely to establish connections with liberal communities and the Democratic Party. Why is this crucially important? There are two reasons why this wins this. Firstly, opening opposition says, hey, there's just a lot of cases, and try to co-opt success. I just think this is wishful thinking, because you don't explain why you're actually able to win a substantially more cases. I just think we'll give you the more compelling reasons why it's more likely for you to win cases, because you can collaborate with the Democratic Party. You're going to get more cases in areas of blue states where the public sentiment and juries are more likely to sympathize with your minority, communities, and just the prosecution that happens within these. It means that you're more likely to actually win in these states, but you're going to get more funding that can actually cover losses. So you don't need to win in order for you to sustain and get sustainable income. It's actually the case that you can still continue fighting for minority communities with the connections that you actually have, because you're irreplaceable. But also the connections in the future means that you are also going to be able to allow getting involved in politics or getting positions in parties. It means that you are actually having diverse career paths at the future. OG's case is simply that you have dominant political parties changing, but I just think this is a lot of uncertainty in the future. Maybe OG is right. You may be successful in the long term, but AI revolution that will simply replace everything is something far more certain that will happen, but it also hits the most privileged people at the same time, which is a reason why we take OG at the best.
All right, thanks for that fine speech. All of you, please leave, especially observers. Actually, instead of doing that,